Hello Dino Peep! If you're new to this channel, hi, I'm Tia. I have 13,000 hours in ARK and I create content and tutorials and tools for ARK. If these things interest you, welcome to this channel. With the announcement that there will be no Cryopods in ARK Survival Ascended at launch, it has stirred a small storm within the ARK community. There's a divided community when it comes to this topic. Some players don't like Cryopods and are happy that they won't be in the game, while others believe that they're an essential part of the game, even though I belong to the second group and believe that Cryopods have greatly improved the game. I understand the reason of the former group. For me personally, it's about weighing the pros and cons of the Cryopods that have made me part of the second group. In this video, I want to explain in detail why Cryopods were so important for ARK Survival Evolved and why ARK Survival Ascended will be severely limited without them. I'll focus on 2 points here, one from a player's perspective and one from the perspective of someone who develops tools for ARK and engages into theory crafting. So let's start with a player's perspective because I think that's what you are most interested in. I've played ARK since 2015, so I know ARK without Cryopods. I'm familiar with the problems that ARK had without Cryos and how much Cryos have solved many of these issues. Let's start with one of the first problems, and that is the tribe dino cap. When I was considering whether to join a tribe with others, I didn't think that we might have a problem of reaching the tribe limit too quickly. Especially if there are multiple breeders in the tribe. Many of my ARK friends are breeders with their own projects, and they need space in the tribe dino cap. PvP players probably don't understand what I mean, because their dino cap was always calculated and limited based on the platform saddles. In PvE, however, all creatures count towards the limit, so every little single dodo. This means that if 2 breeders join a tribe, each breeder has only half of the creatures available for taming and keeping. This is problematic because it discourages people from playing in tribes as the tribe's dino cap is reached even faster. For me, it means I can either only play solo or with people who do not care much about taming their own creatures and prioritize, for example, building or other activities over dinos. And this kind of disrupted my plans to some extent. I can tell you how breeders used to handle this before Cryopods even existed. Breeders used to focus on breeding a single species per server. This means they raised 400 female dinos and used them for breeding. If you've been on official PvE servers and if you've seen these large metal box-like bases, you can imagine how many of these breeding farms there were. All of this changed with Cryopods and players started to put the dinos away if they don't need them. A second point is creatures being scattered everywhere, and it's another relic from the cryo-free days, and this is the practice of leaving dinos outside of the base. I remember a time when players would just leave their dinos standing around everywhere. They would just place a feeding trough somewhere and park their dinos next to it. In PvE, you couldn't do much about it because creatures from other tribes are protected, and depending on the creature, often Rexes and Gigas, they couldn't be taken out easily by wild creatures. The worst it was in front of cave entrances, farming spots, and especially on obelisk platforms. Although all these practices violated the rules of official servers, players simply accepted the risk of their dinos being wiped if they got in the way, and new dinos would anyway just appear after a day. Admins often couldn't keep up with clearing the platforms, and on certain servers you simply couldn't do boss fights anymore. I remember this well because when we played on Official Island, our carefully planned boss run was almost ruined because we couldn't get our dinos on the platform. Creatures parked somewhere also blocked base spots. If creatures were parked in front of your own tribe's base entrances, as some PvE trolls like to do, you could at least take your creatures outside and release them. Now, unfortunately, that would not longer be possible. As you can see, this opens a lot of potential for people who want to exploit it. Should these people be punished by the admins? I mean, of course. But let's be realistic, it probably won't happen in a timely manner because there are more servers than there are admins on official servers, and the waiting time for tickets can be a few days or even a few weeks. Then we have the server dino cap. We talked about the tribe cap first, but there's also a problem with the server dino cap. We probably won't reach it so quickly, but it was definitely a problem on official servers where some servers stopped allowing players to tame or breed dinos because the servers were simply full. Some players on servers that didn't want to have new players playing on them would intentionally fill these caps with rafts or dodos. And even without Cryopods, it's even easier because there are already so many other dinos on the server, and depending on the population, not many dinos are needed to abuse this limit. But even without abuse, popular servers could reach this cap normally. This led to major conflicts and sometimes outright feuds among players, who wanted to force each other to kill their own creatures. All in all, fuller servers were always under great tension, and there were often heated disputes. Another point is the player health, and let's talk about a point that I consider important. This is not so much about a game mechanic, but rather about a healthy attitude towards the game, and how long you play. ARK multipliers and the game mechanics without cryopods force players to make unhealthy decisions about their gaming behavior. I will explain you what I can personally share since I played on official and I observed this myself. We were breeding gigas, raising them, and of course also imprinting them. Raising gigas on official servers requires a certain level of dedication that is bordering insanity. But I can explain what it looked like. We had 4 people in the tribe. 3 of them were in the same time zone, and 1 person was in a slightly offset time zone. All tribe members worked or had other life commitments, as you would expect from adults. However, ARK required gigas for specific game mechanics and events. Raised gigas back then took 14 days, not in-game days, but 14 real-life days to grow. The baby phase, during which you have to hand-feed the giga before it starts eating from the feeding trough, lasted 24 real hours. The time between imprints was 8 hours, and the maximum time allowed for imprints during those 14 days was 30 minutes in total. This means that if all of your imprints took longer than 30 minutes combined over 14 days, you won't be able to fully imprint your giga. So we had our gigas hatching according to a schedule for the next 14 days. No other plans were made that could have prevented us from having access to the game every 8 hours. During the nighttime, accounts were shared to ensure that half of the players got some sleep, and the other half could continue imprinting on their behalf. At the end of those 14 days, I was burnt out. I had slept for no more than 4 hours at a stretch, and I was constantly stressed. And during the final imprint, I slept for 10 minutes too long during an afternoon nap, and I missed the last imprint. Nothing about this experience was enjoyable. The only positive experience I took from that was the bond with the people from my tribe, who later sat with me in Discord and encouraged me because I was almost in tears for missing the last imprint. Normally I would have said I overreacted, but the fact that I vividly remember it shows how incredibly stressful it was to play this game without cryopods and how much the lack of sleep just messed with me. I believe that while it's in the developers' interest for players to play a lot and to play a long time, they also should aim to not encourage this type of gameplay, especially when there's no alternative. Cryopods made the game more accessible for many player groups, people with families, people with full-time jobs, and even people with other hobbies. I would hate to see us move away from that. Now I have some additional shorter points, and this is raiding, trading, etc. Trading is much easier with cryopods than without, especially when offering offline trades. This means having a vault with a pin code containing the cryo and the person trading with you placed in the vault what they're trading for. Of course, you can unclaim dinos and leave them in a pin-coded room, but many servers run scripts to delete unclaimed dinos to prevent someone from crashing the server by leaving dinos on breeding, or people just unclaiming their creatures and releasing them. In PvP, it's now impossible to raid dino lines. Overall, this may not be a terrible thing, but I think it will make it more difficult to raid players with the best dinos, especially for newer tribes. There was a big discussion back in the days that tribes who had the strongest dinos basically were said to be undefeatable. Now we've talked about the points related to the game mechanics, but cryos have been much more than just that. Cryos are the perfect analysis and debug tool. Analysis because you can see your dino colors with the ID. And this is also an accessibility tool, as people with color blindness finally can see what colors are on their dinos. It is a debug tool because they can fix almost any dino that isn't working the intended way. And this includes passively tamed dinos that continue to wander off after being tamed because they don't understand that they should follow you now. Let's talk about broken Dino Stats. And while I hope this won't be a problem in ASA, let's assume the worst and assume it still will be an issue. When you imprint a dino, it receives a certain stat boost. These boosts are applied on the server, and then they're not fully synchronized with your client. This means you won't see the stats in your game. It also means that if you write down your dino stats, like if you're a breeder or you use software like ARK Smart Breeding, you cannot trust that the displayed stats are correct. The only 2 methods that we had to fix this was cryopods, that was the easiest and most accessible way, and HLNA on Genesis 1 and 2. So when you press H and aim at a dino with HLNA, it shows the stats. But before displaying these stats, HLNA triggers a synchronization between the client and the server. Therefore, you always have the correct stats shown. Without cryopods and HLNA, you either have to leave the render area completely for some time, which is the easiest but not necessarily the most reliable way, or you have to completely restart the server. This method is reliable but not feasible on a multiplayer server or especially on an official server. And the same problem applies to spawned creatures if you, like me, engage in theory crafting. However, this is a niche topic, so I'll just briefly talk about it. Creatures spawned into the game need to be cryoed twice because their stats are broken. They either display excessively high stats, or things like the stamina bar will go down, but the dino actually doesn't regain stamina anymore. In this case, only a cryopod will help you. As you can see, cryopods were truly a blessing, not only for the game, but also for content creators and tool developers like ARK Smart Breeding, Dododex, and Beacon. Cryopods ensured that the creatures actually functioned as intended and displayed the stats as the game intended. I believe all parties involved hope that these concerns can be addressed by fixing these display stats issues, or providing another way to synchronize stats between the server and the client. However, there seems to be a negative sentiment surrounding this, and I can't blame people for having this negative sentiment. Now you know my reasons for supporting cryopods, but as I mentioned before, even though I'm on the team pro cryopod, I completely understand the reasons people have for not wanting cryopods. And I think it's important that we listen to both sides and weigh the pros and cons against each other. I know this was a long video on just one topic, but thank you for listening this far. And let me know in the comments how you feel about the cryopod topic. I wish you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!